We are 1 minute early. Welcome everybody once again to Jivamukti Yoga and Jivamukti Yoga's Charter for Change conversations. Every month we've been having these conversations about interesting topics for us. Since we had this conversation in April on Earth Day about Seaspiracy, and the truth that's happening in the oceans, we wanted to bring on a special guest from that film who's here with us and then in a moment, Sharon and I will welcome him. So joining me, again, I'm very grateful for Sharon Gannon, the founder of Jivamukti Yoga, to be here to take part in this conversation. She's a lifelong animal rights activist and environmental advocate. An author of many books, including Yoga and Veganism. She spoke extensively about the links between all these issues that we face every day and how to apply the principles of yoga in solving some of the most difficult problems we face as a planet. So our special guest is Captain Paul Watson, the founder of Sea Shepherd Conservation Society, the marine conservation and anti-poaching organization, which has been on the high seas for a number of years, for 40 years, I think. So this is very, very exciting, Paul, that you're here with us to give us some of your wisdom and your insights at what you have seen in the oceans. And so just one thing I wanted to mention, in Seaspiracy, there are so many interesting facts, and I know that not all of the work could not be showcased in a 90-minute film, but there's certain things in there that you might like to have seen. So here's a chance maybe you could discuss. I think Sharon and I, both of us, will have questions for you. So to me, the big thing in the film was the oceans are right there. So if you talk about climate change, for example, as a carbon sequestration engine, the oceans are right there. And then on the land, almost blind, we're trying to find new ways of taking out CO2 from the atmosphere. So that is something that I thought was very stark. Of course, there's a lot of issues like that. So where do we start? Sharon, would you like to ask the first question to Paul?
Yes. Well, I actually heard that Paul say one time that, as I understand it, you studied communications in college, and you have said that for media to be effective, there has to be 4 elements: sex, scandal, violence, and celebrity. So I wonder if this 1-hour Zoom talk will contain all those 4 elements in equal measure, or if we need to. Anyway, that was just a little joke. I don't know. I wanted to ask Paul, I love his analogy of planet Earth as a spaceship hurtling at incredible speed through time and space. And you did talk a little bit about that in Seaspiracy, but I'd like to hear a little bit more from the poetic side of Captain Paul Watson.
Okay, well, thank you. Well, first of all, I should say that what I was saying about sex, celebrities, and scandal and violence refers to the mainstream media. That's what they demand. If you want a story, you have to have one of those elements, or else they're just simply not interested. So you have to incorporate those elements into your story, and it's one way or the other. To give you an example on that, back in 1984, I organized a campaign to protect wolves in northern Canada. And they were shooting wolves. That's very violent. They were threatening to shoot us, got more violence. The environment minister was we exposed the fact that he took a bribe from a big game hunting organization. We had scandal. So with violence and scandal, I recruited Bo Derek as our spokesperson for this. And at the press conference, a reporter said, "What does Bo Derek know about wolves? This is ridiculous to have her as your spokesperson." And I said, "Well, I don't make the rules. You guys make the rules. And the fact is that she's our spokesperson. The place is filled with TV cameras right now. It's going to be the front page of your newspaper tomorrow. There's not a damn thing you can do about it, is there?" And that's where it was.
So you got the sex and the celebrity right in there. Yes.
So you have to incorporate those things to get your message across. But anyway, as to the definition of the planet Earth, back in 2015, I spoke at the UN conference on climate change, and they were talking about everything about one except for one thing: the ocean. They were talking how are we going to do this, how are we going to do that, but nobody was talking about the ocean. We had to set up an ocean forum to address this, and I said at the time, look, the solution is to allow the ocean, or the sea actually, to repair the damage we've done to it, because that is where climate is regulated, in the sea. Leave it alone. Shut down heavy gear industrialized fishing operations. Stop polluting the sea. Leave it alone for at least 50 years to allow it to recover, and it will recover. We don't have to do anything except leave it alone. But I also compared the planet to a spaceship at the time. And what that means is that I believe that this shouldn't be called the planet Earth. It should be called the planet Ocean. But the planet Ocean is this incredibly large spaceship that's on this incredible voyage around the Milky Way galaxy, a voyage that takes 250 million years to go around just once. And on that, every spaceship, you have a life support system, and that life support system provides the food we eat and the air we breathe, and also regulates the climate and the temperature. And that life support system is maintained by a crew of living beings. And on Spaceship Earth, we human beings, we're not crew members, we're passengers. We're having a wonderful time entertaining ourselves. But what we are doing is murdering crew members. There's only so many crew members you can kill before this machinery begins to fall apart. The life support system is no longer capable of supporting life. To give you an example, since 1950, there's been a 40% diminishment in phytoplankton populations in the sea. And phytoplankton provides up to 70% of the oxygen in the air that we breathe. If phytoplankton disappears, we all die. We do not live on a planet without phytoplankton. It is the foundation for life on this planet. And trees, of course, and plants provide the additional 30%, but we need that 70%. And why is phytoplankton being diminished? Because we diminished the fishes, the whales, the seabirds, the marine mammals. And they provide the nutrient base for the phytoplankton, the nitrogen and the iron in their feces primarily and on their bodies, but that is provided to the nutrient base for the phytoplankton. When you diminish those species, you diminish the phytoplankton base. And there are three basic laws of ecology. The first is the law of diversity, that the strength of any ecosystem depends upon diversity within it. The more diversity, the stronger the ecosystem. The second is the law of interdependence, that all species within an ecosystem are interdependent with each other. And the third is the law of finite resources, that there's a limit to growth because there's a limit to carrying capacity. But when one species, ours, steals the carrying capacity of other species, that causes diminishment both in diversity and interdependence. And that can only go one way, to our own diminishment and possibly our own extinction. So that's why I always say, if the ocean dies, we all die. We have a vested interest in that. Now, the other thing is, what is the ocean? We have an idea that it's what we think is the ocean is the sea, and it's part of the ocean, but it isn't the ocean. The ocean is a planet. This is a planet ocean. It's water. It's water in continuous circulation. And it's the element that supports all living things. And that water sometimes is in the sea, sometimes it's in the clouds, it's in ice, it's underground, and it's in the cells of every plant and animal on the planet. And the water that's in our bodies now was once in the sea, once in the ice, once underground, and once in the bodies of animals and in the cells of plants, constantly moving through those different mediums. Therefore, unifying everything on this planet, bonded together by the element water. And I think that is really the key to our survival, this understanding that we're part of everything and we're not dominant or in control of anything. We're part of it. And we have to live in harmony with all these other species if we're going to survive ourselves.
And I think that that's where the ecological problems that we're having, it's an ecological crisis, yes, it's an environmental crisis, but at the cause of it, it is a spiritual crisis, because we as a species seem to have forgotten our connection, our interdependence with all other forms of life. And we think that they just exist to entertain us or provide us with what we can exploit from them. And that is I think, the cause of this crisis, that we have forgotten. You know, in yoga, there's a term, the Atman, and that means the eternal soul. And every living being contains the Atman. It's not just in it's not just in human beings, and it's what makes that being a person. Whales are people, trees are people, all of life has the Atman, the soul within it, and that soul is eternal, and the body grows out of that soul. And bodies do come and go, but the soul is eternal. But of course, human beings, we tend to think that we are only the body, and we identify so strongly with our bodies and our personalities. And we really feel that, like you said, we have a right, that the earth belongs to us. That's how we kind of live our life. And, you know, if we show some charity to other beings, that's a good thing, but it's not necessary. And we can kind of divvy out a few pennies here and there, but we don't really understand that our very existence depends on serving others, on supporting others, on caring for others as if they were our own self, because they actually are our own self. We are bigger than the limits of our skin. And Captain Paul Watson, I'd like to ask you about when you had that revelation that I've read about, I've heard about many years ago, where you looked into the eye of a whale and you saw a person, and that you have said that was a pivotal point in your life, and certainly your life as an activist. Can you share some of that with us?
Well, certainly, but first I'd like to say that there's two ways of looking at reality on this planet. And indigenous cultures retain the first, which is the biocentric point of view, this understanding that we're part of everything. Almost every major religion today is of an anthropocentric point of view, which means we're number one, we're in control, we're dominant. And we forget our connections with all of the other species. But the incident you referred to is back in June of 1975. We had come up with this idea to protect whales from the Soviet whaling fleet, actually in the North Pacific. And we were reading a lot of Gandhi at the time. So we felt that all we had to do was put our bodies between the harpoon and the whales, and they wouldn't kill the whales, put our bodies on the line. And so I found myself in a small inflatable boat with Robert Hunter, and the two of us were in this boat, and we raced in front of a Soviet harpoon vessel that was chasing down a pod of 8 sperm whales. And every time the harpooner tried to get a shot, I would maneuver the small boat to block his aim. And this worked for about 25 minutes, and he was getting increasingly frustrated until the captain on the Soviet vessel come running down the catwalk and screamed into the ear of the harpooner. Then he looked down on us, smiled, and brought his finger across his throat. And that's when I realized Gandhi wasn't going to work for us that day. And a few moments later, there was this incredible explosion, and this explosive harpoon sailed over our head. The line attached to it almost hit us, could have cut our boat in half if it had of, but it slammed into the backside of a female in the pod that was in front of us. And she screamed. Didn't know whales could scream until that moment. And rolled on her side, blood everywhere, and the largest whale in the pod suddenly rose up. His tail slapped down on the water like a thunderclap, and he dove. And he swam directly underneath of us, ignored us, threw himself straight at the bow of the Soviet vessel to attack the harpooner who was attacking his pod. But they were ready for him. They knew he would do this. So they had an unattached harpoon ready, and at point blank range, pulled the trigger, hit the whale in the head, and the whale fell back, screaming in the water, rolling in agony on the surface, blood everywhere. And I caught his eye, and suddenly he dove again. This time I saw a trail of bloody bubbles coming straight at us, real fast, underwater. And he came up and out of the water at an angle so that the next move would fall forward on top of us. And as his head rose up out of the sea, and I looked into his eye, which was just a few feet from me, so close I could see my own reflection in that eye. And what I saw there was understanding. I think he understood what we were trying to do, because I could see an effort that he made to pull himself back, began to fall back into the sea. His eye disappeared beneath the surface, and he died. Could have killed us, chose not to do so. I saw something else in that eye, though, a feeling of pity, and not for himself, but for us, that we could take life so thoughtlessly. Why were the Russians killing those whales? They didn't eat them. They killed sperm whales for sperm oil and spermaceti oil, which is highly prized as a high heat resistant oil for lubricating machinery. And one of the things it was most prized for was for the construction and operation of intercontinental ballistic missiles. Oh. And I said, here we are killing this incredibly intelligent, beautiful, socially complex, self-aware being, a sentient being, for the purpose of making a weapon meant for the mass extermination of human beings. And that's when it struck me. We're insane. Ecologically, we're certainly insane. And I said from that moment on, I don't do what I do for people. I do what I do for them. I'm here to defend them. They are our clients. Everything that lives in sea and on land too, but not for people. I mean, people will benefit, of course, but we're not motivated by it. But what that does mean is that I'm immune to criticism. I don't care what people think about what we do, because it means nothing. In 1986, we sank half of Iceland's whaling fleet, destroyed their whale processing plant, and shut them down for 17 years, saving hundreds and hundreds of whales. But I was approached by a representative from Greenpeace, which is a group I co-founded. He said, I just wanted to let you know that what you did in Iceland was reprehensible and unforgivable, and you're an embarrassment to this entire movement. And I said, well, I don't care. I didn't really do this for you or for Greenpeace or for any human being. Find me a whale that disagrees with what we did. I promise you I won't do it again. And that's who we represent.
Wow. You know, Patanjali in the Yoga Sutra talks about there are 5 main obstacles to yoga, or to the remembrance of your interdependence, your interconnectedness with all of life, which is really what yoga, what the realization that happens in samadhi is the realization of, that you're just part of something very much larger than your ego self. And he says that there are 5 big obstacles, but the biggest of those 5, one is ignorance of who you really are. The other is identification with your ego self and the I, me, mine syndrome, and all of that comes along with that. The other is raga and devesha, which is your preferences. You go after things that you think will bring you comfort or enjoyment, and you just say you hate or you run away from things that you don't like. But the 5th one is the biggie. And the 5th one is called abhinivesha. And abhinivesha is the root, really, of the other ones, and it is the fear of death. That's what abhinivesha is, the fear of death. The fear of death, of course, is the fear of losing. All fears stem from the fear of death, because we identify so much with who we are as our mortal physical body. We fear death. A normal person, unenlightened person, fears death so much. And you, Captain Paul Watson, I mean, just in the last couple minutes here with us, you have displayed a little window into your past, which shows us that you're quite fearless. And to be an activist of your caliber that has made such an impact on the hearts, minds of not just human beings, but all beings. How did you develop this this abhinivesha, overcoming the fear of death? You don't seem to be afraid. I mean, I know that your life has been threatened many, many times, and probably too many for you to even count. And yet it doesn't seem to kind of like rose off of you. Can you, tell us yogis who are trying to deal with this obstacle to enlightenment and the remembrance of who we are, how did you do it?
Well, I've always been this way. I think that when I was a boy, I lived in an area with the highest tides in the world, Passamaquoddy Bay in eastern Canada. And we were playing pirates, I guess. And
Pirates?
I was about 8 years old. And I got tied to the mast of a ship, a sunken ship, which was no water around. But then they forgot me and the tide was coming in. And so I saw the water rising. It rose up to my chest. And at that point, I realized that I was going to drown. And my response to that was to just accept that that was going to happen. And I believe that young children actually have a better acceptance of the possibility of death than adults do. I've met many children who have had cancer and that who speak like they know they're going to die, but they do it without fear. Mm. Anyway, that's what happened with me. And fortunately, what happened is some teenage boys came by and heard me, and they came down and cut me loose. And I didn't die, but I had accepted it. So it's been that way ever since, really. And the realization is that everybody's going to die. I mean, there's no out there. So the most important thing is how you live, and take that time that you have and to do it properly. I also learned a very valuable lesson back in 1973 when I was 22. I volunteered to be a medic for the American Indian Movement during the occupation of Wounded Knee in South Dakota. And I was there with the American Indian Movement, and we were surrounded by 3,000 federal officers who were shooting at us, 20,000 rounds a night into the village. And they killed 2, and they wounded 46. And I went to Russell Means, and I said, he was the leader of the American Indian Movement. And I said, we don't have any hope of winning here. The odds against us are overwhelming. Why are we here? And he said something to me, which has stayed with me all my life. He says, we're not concerned about winning or losing. We're not concerned about the odds against us. We're here because this is the right place to be, the right time to do it, and the right thing to do. We don't worry about the future. We concentrate and focus on the present. And what you do in the present will define what the future will be. You have no power over the future. You only have power over the present. And every decision you make in the present will define that future. And so that's why I don't get depressed. I don't get pessimistic because, where is all this heading? I don't know. But I do know that what I do will define where it's going. And therefore, I have to be very aware of what I do, what everybody should be aware of what they do and how that incorporates it. Now, the Mohawk people, they have a saying, which is, make no decision in your life until you take into account the consequences of that decision on all future generations. And that's how we should live our life. What am I doing today? How will that affect people 100 years from now, 500 years from now? And so it's really a way of viewing the world. You know, I sometimes ask people, I said, what was your great-great-great-great-great-grandmother's name? It's 500 years ago. What was her name? Most people say, well, I don't know. Well, does that really matter? But you can go to Aboriginal peoples, Indigenous peoples, and ask that question and get an answer. And the reason being is these are people who know where they came from. If you know where you came from, you know who you are. And if you know who you are, you know where you're going. And it's called the continuum. And you're part of that continuum. What's on the river of life is flowing towards the sea. And you just are part of it. You're living at that point. And so I think that really is the way I view it. Anyway, as far as all the risks I've taken and that, I'm 70 years old. So obviously, things worked out well.
Wow. You just eloquently gave the essential teaching contained in the Bhagavad Gita. You do what you do with perfection, you do your best, and you don't worry about the results of those actions.
But
the results, like you said, will be taken care of. It depends on what you do now. And to motivate your actions with the concern for how will this impact others? How will this impact the greater community? That's essential. You are giving us yogic teachings, Captain Paul Watson.
Well, what is important is that the recognition of what we do doesn't just affect the future 10 years from now. It affects it 1,000,000 years from now. Life on this planet will be defined by what is happening now. Every extinction of every species radically changes the future. And the preservation of a species changes it for the better. And there are certain key species on this planet which are far more important than we are, that if they disappear, all other species are in serious trouble. The phytoplankton being probably the best example of that, all the plant family called phytoplankton. But for instance, without sharks, we wouldn't have healthy coral reefs. Without coral reefs, we wouldn't have healthy fish populations. Without bees and worms and trees, we would have a very serious problem. About 10 years ago, I got a call from Brett Hume. He was a reporter for the Fox Network. And he said, I heard you say that trees and worms and bees and fish are more important than people. And did you say that? I said, yeah, I said that. So how could you say something so outrageous as to say that worms and bees are more important than people? I said, well, I said it because worms, trees, bees, and fish are more important than people. That's why I said it. He said, what are you talking about? I said, because they can live here without us. We cannot live here without them. We need them. They don't need us. So that's why they're more important than we are from an ecological point of view, certainly. But if you believe that we're the only species that matter and that it's all given just to us, then of course you're going to find such a viewpoint to be outrageous.
Do you ever experience burnout, despair?
No.
Hey!
that's the answer to my next question. With all the challenges of being chased in different countries, in Germany and France in the last few years, I thought, how do you keep a good, how do you keep hope?
You have to look at life as an adventure also. And when I had to flee Germany, I went into exile for 17 months at sea. I crossed the Atlantic, crossed North America, crossed the Pacific, made my way to the southern coast to the coast of Antarctica. And I didn't have any papers. I had no passport. I had nothing to do that. And to me, that was just wonderful adventure. The time I was spent on deserted islands in the South Pacific, like off of Tonga or the Great Barrier Reef, and that was, I loved every moment of it on that. So I looked on it as an adventure and enjoyed it. And that's what I've done with all the campaigns that we're involved with too, is that they've always been, this is something to enjoy. I mean, when people say, well, risking your life is just part of life. It's, I just, when crew would come to the ship, I would say, are you willing to risk your life to protect a whale? And if they say no, then I said, well, then we can't use you. And when people say to me, that's awfully unreasonable, asking young people to risk their life to protect a whale, I said, really? You do it all the time. You ask young people to risk their life to defend oil wells or flags or religion or real estate. I'm asking people to risk their life to protect an endangered species. I said, that's got to be far more noble than protecting a piece of cloth or an oil rig somewhere.
Wow.
So, Paul, you've been on the high seas for so many years and you've seen so much. do you feel one with the ocean when you're out there?
Well, I think all of us should feel one with the ocean because, like as I said before, we're all in the ocean. We are the ocean, so we are one with the ocean. Uh, I find the sea to be far more comfortable place than the land. I've never felt intimidated by anything at sea.
Mhm.
You know, where you feel a little wary of, you know, or in concern is when you walk down the streets of some cities, because you know, there's a lot of things that can surprise you there that you have to be very much ready to deal with if it happens. You know, and I've had a few experiences there. I remember one time I was only, I think I was 19. I was in a bus depot in Seattle. I was just washing my hands, and these three guys came from behind me, and all I heard was, "Give us your money." I said, "What?" They said, "Give us your money." I said, I looked at them. I said, "You know, oh God, I'm from Canada. We're not into this." I just walked right by them, and they didn't know how to deal with that.
I like that line. We're not into this. Great.
That's wonderful. So,
So, you know, I want to ask you something. Now, with the pandemic, do you find that there's less hubris and the feeling of business as usual and impunity amongst people? You know, every day you see some change happening. Like yesterday, I saw a very beautiful email from PETA saying Canada Goose is now going to finally, after so much campaigns, they will give up animal fur. I mean, that is a huge thing. I mean, like that, you know, every day you see some good news, and then sometimes you see bad news, people going backwards. Sometimes you wonder what it takes for humanity to stop shooting ourselves in the foot, like the way we treat the oceans and all of the commercial fishing and the trawling, all those things we learned from Seaspiracy. What do you say to that, Paul, for a new generation of activists, for teachers, of what they would do, and what do you think the pandemic has shown us?
Change comes about because of dedication, persistence, courage, passion, and imagination. We have seen that change. 1980, nobody knew what a vegan was. You know, 1972, we took out an advertisement in Vancouver that said, big yellow letters on a billboard said ecology, and in small letters, look it up, get involved. Nobody knew what it meant. So we've come a long ways. I mean, just look at our evolution socially, you know, the end of slavery in many places, women getting the right to vote in many places, the civil rights movement, all of these things came about through the application of courage, passion, and imagination, and a lot of persistence and determination.
Mhm.
And so I'm very optimistic that that's where change comes from. And now we have a young generation that has no choice.
Yeah.
This is their future is far more different than what our future was. Uh, at my age, I had I guess, the opportunity to have lived in probably the most materially wealthy and freest generation on the history of the planet. That'll never come again. Don't have the resources to support it. And the laws that we have to deal with right now are far more repressive now than they were back then. In 1982, was it 1983, I blockaded a harbor in Canada and kept the entire sealing fleet from coming out. And I couldn't do that today. They'd blow me out of the water if I did that today. So we had much more freedom to intervene, and you have to adapt your tactics to that. In 1977, I developed a strategy which I called aggressive nonviolence. And I said, we're not going to hurt anybody. And in 44 years, we've not hurt anybody, but we're going to be aggressive. We're not going to protest. I find protesting to be very submissive. It's like, please, please, please don't do that. And they do it anyway. And all you do is hang a banner and hold a protest sign. No, you got to intervene. You know, you don't walk down the street and see a kitten being stomped and do nothing. You don't walk down the street and see a woman being raped and do nothing except take their picture and hang a banner. You've got to intervene, and you've got to take those risks. Those are things worth taking a risk for. So I've seen a lot of progress in the movement over the last 30, 40 years, and it's getting more so. And now we got more and more young people all the time. You know, look at Greta Thunberg has accomplished, and, speaking to world leaders, to the United Nations, everything. She's not, when she's only 16 years old. I mean, and there's so many native people like Shira Batista, who's a native climate change advocate. She's been reaching a lot of people. And so there's a lot happening, which is very, very positive, and a lot of changes, which are very good. Will it be enough? I don't know. But I'm not surprised about the pandemic. It's been coming for a long time. In 1994, Laura Garrett wrote a book called The Coming Plague. She predicted all of this. It was all very predictable. And it's all because of, she says, coming as a world out of balance. That is the cause for this. Vaccinations are nothing more than a Band-Aid. Unless we address the real cause, COVID-19 is just a harbinger of worse to come. But see, we've seen these plagues come. It started with AIDS. You had Ebola, you had hantavirus, you had West Nile virus, you had SARS, you had MERS, you had Zika. But we ignored those. And why do we ignore those? That didn't affect white people. Didn't affect Europeans, didn't affect Americans. So we could ignore that. Now COVID-19 comes along. We can't ignore this one. It's hitting everybody. But there's going to be more viruses unless we address the root cause of this, which is the destruction of ecosystems and the diminishment of species. Viruses are a very beneficial part of life on this planet. There are literally hundreds of millions of them because every plant, every animal has viruses associated with them, which are beneficial. We couldn't live without them. But what happens when you diminish a species? You create a situation where the virus associated with that species has to go somewhere. And 8 billion of us, we're pretty attractive, So species like pigs and monkeys and bats, which are somewhat mammals and close to us, those viruses are going to jump. It's called zoonomic transmission. A lot of the diseases we've had for a long time, the common cold, got it from horses. Flu, get it from pigs, get it from birds. So we get these, smallpox came from cows and originated. So, those are zoonomic transmissions, but now we're getting it from wild species. Added to that is pathogens being released from melting permafrost due to climate change. And like in 2017, 1,000 reindeer died and one human being died from an anthrax spore that was released from the permafrost. That was in Siberia. And we're going to see more and more of that too. We have to be prepared for that kind of future. And I think that the best way to prepare for that is to protect those ecosystems which keep this world in balance. Because a world out of balance is going to lead to a world of disease, to drought, to famine, to all of those problems of which we're now seeing right now. We're now seeing heat waves in the West in California that we've not seen before. Fires that have been raging over the last few years we've not seen before. Storms that we've not seen before. And still, much of humanity is in denial, both in action and in thought. And politicians are in complete denial, because it's not in their interests. I mean, they're concerned about getting elected. They're not concerned about what the world's going to be like 50 years from now. That's what they need is campaign contributions right now. And that's going to come from the corporations that have a vested interest in continuing what's happening right now. So it's a thing that in essence, we all want to change, but very few actually will change. It all seems very attractive until you actually have to make sacrifices in order to do that. But those sacrifices will have to be made.
Paul Watson, you are a radical,
right,
in the true sense of the word. You go to the root. You're interested in the cause, not in dealing with symptoms. And yet, as you definitely are involved in direct action, but it seems like your direct action is in the form of, well, as you just so beautifully explained to us, protest is useless in your point of view, just saying, please, please, please don't do this, and holding up banners, taking pictures. But it seems like what you do is you interrupt harm. You kind of get in between a defenseless being and a human being who is attempting to murder, or at least do something very cruel to that defenseless being. And, you know, I think that you're redefining in that method of dealing with violence is redefining this idea of the pacifist turn the other cheek. That was supposed to be something that Jesus said. I don't believe he actually said that, but people do.
Yeah.
That when faced with, you know, if somebody hits you on one side, you give them the other side. But according to yoga, that would provide an opportunity for that other person to hit you on the other side and incur a lot of bad karma, which would keep the cycle of violence going. So a radical would not do that. A radical would not give their other cheek to be hit. They would find a more strategic method to break the cycle of violence. And it seems like that's what you're doing with the interrupting of harm.
Yeah, I would describe what I do as interventionism.
Intervention, yeah.
But also with your analogy, in Aikido, for instance, if someone were to slap your face, what you do is move out of the way of the slap and then redirect the arm away.
Yes.
Aikido way, yeah.
Yes.
But also, I've never really regarded myself as a radical. I'm a conservative. I conserve. That is the nature of conservatism, is to conserve. These people who call themselves conservatives, they're the radicals. They're radically destroying the planet. So therefore, they're the radicals. So again, it's all the way how you look at it. I once did this talk show in Fresno, California, on a right-wing talk show program, which was a lot of fun because this guy was calling me, he says, "You're an eco-terrorist." I said, "Oh, I never worked for Monsanto. I'm not.
Yeah, that's a good.
And he said, "Well, you know, you're a radical." I said, "No, I'm more conservative than you are." I said, "Why don't you judge me on? Why don't you ask me test me on your conservative values, not mine." He said, "Well, what's your position about women and gay people in the military?" I'm absolutely opposed to it. I don't think women are gay people should be in the military. And I'll tell you why. I don't think men should be in the military.
Nobody should be in the military.
Then he said, "Well, what's your position on welfare?" Absolutely opposed to welfare. All these corporate welfare bums with their hands out asking for money, feeding at the public trough like General Motors. You know, yeah, I'm totally opposed to welfare. And he just didn't know how to deal with that. You know?
That is an example of such a clever way of reframing the conversation, because I always wondered about that. What's considered normal is the status quo, which is completely destroying everything that we need for human life to sustain, and what you do in the oceans. And then if you talk for the animals, like Sharon has discovered in her life, you're considered a radical, or you're considered an extremist. Both of you are great examples of people who cause good trouble, to shine light on these issues. So I think your thesis and your knowledge about how these things happened, especially about the pandemic, is fascinating. We also heard in the Seaspiracy movie that because these people's livelihoods on the African coast were destroyed by commercial trawlers coming and taking out their livelihood, they went inside and they started to consume bushmeat and other things, and that was the origin of all these diseases like Ebola. So that kind of information is not out there. Of course, some of the large corporations and the self-interests who look for short-term profit and short-term gain at the cost of everything that we need, they don't want us to know that. So I think in that sense, I think one of your comments, Paul, you had once said, on your ships, you don't have guns, but you have cameras. So you're actually exposing what's happening on the high seas when you intervene, so to speak, for the whole world to see. So you don't have anything to hide in that sense. So Sharon, also, could you talk a little bit about how, before the time when it was fashionable to talk about veganism and animal rights or even climate change, you had the courage to do it. and how did your experience inform what's happening now?
Well, I saw a movie, and that's what changed my life, and a movie called The Animals Film in 1982, and I didn't want to be a part of the insanity that was depicted in that film. That film showed the many ways that human beings are treating animals and relating to animals, and I didn't want to be that, and so I had to find a way to to be different than how I was before I saw the film. Films and documenting things is very important, and I know that a big part of Sea Shepherd's success and is that you document everything, and everything, every interaction, and you like is what is traditionally done on ships. You keep a captain's log, and so you archive and write down everything that happens. And I think that that's very important, and it's not done by a lot of us who really truly want to make a difference in the world. And I think it's very important. And people, when they hear something, when they read a book, reading is actually an audio experience. But when they see something, when they see a film, because we live in a time when people are affected more by what they see. Seeing is believing to many people. And so to actually see what's happening can make a stronger, more immediate impact upon people, and get them to change. I mean, I know that because that's what happened to me. And I want to just take an opportunity. Seaspiracy is a great film, absolutely. And of course, I'm doubly excited about it because it was produced by Kip Anderson, a Jivamukti teacher. So yes. There's another film called Watson that was recently made about Paul Watson's life. And it was directed by a woman, Leslie Chilcutt, yes. This film, it's fairly recent, 2020, 2019?
2018.
18, okay. Anyway, it's available. I think Amazon, maybe Netflix or something. It is available. It's beautifully done. The underwater photography is extraordinary. It's beautifully done. That film impacted me in a very positive, great way about Sea Shepherd. Because I got to learn about you, Paul Watson, a little bit more, and your fearlessness and your motivation, where it came from. I learned about your summer with the Beaver family and how you started to disrupt, or the intervention, interrupting harm, and how effective that has been. And also there was something very poignant that rang true to me as a yoga practitioner that you said in that film. You were once again talking about how when you saw the whale and you saw into the whale's eye, but you were talking about how whales see us. They see us, they see through us, and they see us with their ears, you said. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's a contemporary kind of a slang, I hear you, which means I comprehend.
Mhm.
I know where you're coming from. I understand it. I got you, basically. It's a phrase that tends to describe connection, a dissolving of disconnection, and a reconnection with another being when you say, I hear you. And in the yoga system, all of the practices, whether they be asanas or pranayama or meditation, are all geared to develop an acute sense of hearing in the individual, so that they do have the ability to listen and eventually to hear another being. And through that hearing, to come to truly know the interdependency that is the reality of life. And I just wanted to tell our viewers about this other film, Watson, and I hope that you would continue your investigation of the amazing activities of Sea Shepherd and Sea Shepherd Global, and donate.
I was going to say, Sharon, we often get asked the question, what can we do to help? When they see the film Seaspiracy, I have a number of people contacting me saying, hey, how can we help? Well, what can we do? I mean, one thing we always say is to say, spread the word. But when it comes to Sea Shepherd and organizations like that, Paul, what can we do to help? What would you say?
People can become involved on many levels. They can volunteer to be on the ships as crew. They can volunteer to be shore supporters, cleaning beaches, protecting, turtles, sea turtle nests, that kind of thing. Or they can support us financially, because we have a Navy of 12 ships, which is expensive to run.
Sure.
But also they can, through their own habits, mitigate their impact upon, on everything by what they eat and what they do. That's one of the reasons that Sea Shepherd has promoted veganism. We learned a long time ago that there was a direct link. The meat industry kills 65 billion animals a year, and that's not counting what the fish that are taken, which are in the trillions. And the meat industry is the single greatest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions, the single greatest contributor to dead zones in the ocean, the single greatest contributor to groundwater pollution. And if we're serious about addressing those, and I think that that's a logical step, is that we should do that. In addition, of course, there's the question of benevolence, the understanding that these are sentient creatures that deserve to be treated. We have so many ways of justifying what we eat. I always like the fact where, we're like lions and tigers, we're carnivores, and that's what we are. So no, you're not. You've never been a carnivore. Have you ever ripped open a live animal and drank the blood while it's hot coming out of the body? No, you've never done that. You know what you are? You're a necrovore. You eat dead flesh, the same as a buzzard, the same as a jackal, the same as a hyena. And not even worse, the flesh that we eat's been dead for 6 months or a year and has been, cleansed with bleaches and put in artificial dyes. And the red that they put in the meat is all crushed up beetles and, to make that dye. I mean, really, it's quite disgusting. But, we get in, we're in denial about that. We don't want to know about that. I always like the part, well, where do you get your protein from? Oh, geez, I don't know. Well, beans and vegetables, and where do the cows get their protein from? That kind of thing. So,
speaking of cows, cows are the biggest consumers of fish on planet Earth right now, and that's something that very few people know. I mean,
but they're forced to consume that in the factory farm.
Forced.
All animals. Naturally, they wouldn't. Yeah,
not so much cows, but it is used. But 40% of all the fish taken is ground into fish meal.
Yes.
Which is fed to pigs and chickens. Chickens are actually the biggest consumers. So chickens are eating more fish than all the albatrosses and puffins in the world. Domestic house cats are eating more fish than all the seals in the North Atlantic Ocean. That's 2.8 million tons of fish goes directly to cat food. So these fish meal plants, which are being opened up all over the world and everything, just renders the fish into this garbage, which is then fed as a protein base for animals around the world, also to the raising of domestic salmon.
And fish farms, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, you have the other problem, which is bycatch. For every kilo of shrimp that's caught, there's 22 kilos of something else that's destroyed and tossed away. So it's a world out of balance, really. When chickens are eating more fish than puffins and albatrosses, you have a problem. And we kill, what is it? It's like billions and billions of chickens are killed every day. And we sit there and we watch these. This is a male chick. Grind it up. Throw it in the grinder. Throw it in the grinder. Oh, is that normal? That's psychopathic behavior. Yeah, and that it's an absence of empathy, complete empathy. And then, of course, they said, well, we're more intelligent. We're not. We're actually not more intelligent. We just happen to be more intelligent by the criteria that we set for our intelligence. We believe that intelligence is the ability to manipulate tools. If a blob of protoplasm steps out of a spaceship with a ray gun, that must be an intelligent being because it's got a ray gun and came out of a spaceship. But we don't understand non-manipulative intelligences that do not use tools. A dog's, when it comes to the sense of smell, a dog knows what was in your room yesterday. If they were there, they can tell who was there, just by walking in there. I had a debate with a Norwegian whaler one time, and he said, Watson, you say some really incredibly stupid things. You said that whales are more intelligent than people. This is a very stupid thing. How do you say something so stupid? And I said, well, George, I measure intelligence by the ability to live in harmony with within the ecosystem. And by that criteria, whales are far more intelligent than people. And he says, well, yeah, but by that criteria, cockroaches are more important are more intelligent than people. I said, George, you're beginning to understand what I'm trying to tell you.
Well said.
I love your sense of humor. I love your confidence, your fearlessness. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh,
thank you, Paul. So here's a little quote from one of our audience members. Let's honor Captain Paul's fantastic, badass style of activism, interventionism, without denigrating others, which is a great way to summarize your thesis and your knowledge and your prolific data that you have to be able to back up what you're saying. So we're grateful for that, our audience and everyone. And Sharon, thank you for causing good trouble, as always, and changing the narrative and redefining what should be normal versus what is. I think that is a great message for all of our teachers, of our students all over the world. This video will live on Facebook and on YouTube and many places online, so people can watch it afterwards. Thank you both for coming. And as we say at Jiva Mukti, Jai Shri Krishna.
Jai Shri Krishna.
Thank you.